Okay, so we have two types of nested classes. That is the inner class or the static nested class. And we've already differentiated inner class and static nested class in the previous session. Within the inner classes, there are two types. There is the local class and the anonymous class. What we are going to do in this session is to understand the rules for the local class. Then in the next session, we'll go to the rules of the anonymous class and we'll use an example in that. So let's start with the definition. A local class is a class that exists within a block of code inside opening and closing parentheses. So there could be a parenthesis of a method. There could be parentheses between a for loop. We'll talk about for loops later. But if you're coming from a different programming language, you probably already know the loops, for loop. Then it could be within an if statement. Now, I'll walk us through an example. So I'll start by showing us this code, understanding what it's supposed to do, and then we'll review the notes. The notes are in the comments inside it. I'll also make a point of attaching the link to this code in the description, but you can also find it from the source. Please note, if you're going to use the source, the official, I want to repeat this again, although I'd already said it. If you're going to work with the official documentation as your reference, some of the things have since changed. For example, some of the rules about static members have changed as between Java 8 or JDK 8 to JDK 16. So there are some things you'll see in the official documentation that says it's not possible or not supported, and currently it would be that it is supported. So take note of that. And in the comments, we'll see bits and pieces of that. Okay, now this is a class, local class example. There's something I want us, or rather there's something that it does for us. What I'll do is I'll start from the main method because it's the entry point for our runtime engine. So let's see. In the main method, we are invoking validatePhoneNumber, and we are passing in two phone numbers as strings. Now, because we're invoking validatePhoneNumber, let's go to the method validatePhoneNumber. This is the method right here. It is a static method. It is a member of local class example. So what happens inside validate class validate phone number? It has two parameters, phone 1 type string and phone number 2, which is also a type string type. That is why when we're invoking it in the main method, we passed in two strings that are supposed to be phone numbers. Now, inside the method, there's a declaration for an int that carries or rather stores the number length. Then we'll look at the comments later. And then after that, we have a local class. So this is the local class. It is a class that is inside validatePhoneNumber. It is inside a block of code. And in this case, it's inside a method. So in the class, we have a formatted phone number, and we are initializing it to null. I'm seeing that it's grayed out, so I don't think it's really a requirement, but yeah, you can leave it like that, but let me just set it back. You can play around with this code later. So the constructor phone number expects a parameter of phone number, and there's some initialization that will happen with that parameter. So there's a string by the name current, the variable by the name current number, and in that variable, what happens is whatever parameter is passed in, or rather argument that will be passed in while we are invoking this constructor, while we are creating an object from this constructor, we will call replace all on it, and then we will pass our regular expression here and state our replacement. So we are yet to cover regular expression, but at this point I'll have to walk us through it so we can understand what's going on in this line of code. What is happening? This is a regular expression, and this upward facing arrow is a representation of not. So what it means is not 0 to 9. Not 0 to 9. That is what is in our regular expression, not 0 to 9. So between now all the range of numbers between 0 and 9. So we have here passing of our regular expression and then replacing anything that is not 0 to 9 with nothing. So it's like we are deleting. If you find that what has been passed in is, say, F0, okay, we'll run some tests. Let me just, what we intend to have at the end of it is a phone number that is valid, okay? So take anything that is not a number, that is not between 0 and 9, and then replace it with nothing. So it's like you're removing it altogether. That's what we want to do as our initialization in our constructor. And then we use if and else statement. We'll talk about this later too as part of the initialization. And it's a good thing because earlier on before this session, I had walked us through initializations. And I said that if you're talking about instance variables, you can initialize them using constructors. Or if you're talking about instance members, you can initialize them using constructors. And if it's a static variable, then you would need to work with, and you want to have some logic in the initialization, you can work with initializing blocks and so on and so forth. So if you missed that, please look into it. This was already covered, the initialization of logic inside the constructor. So moving forward, what is our logic? We are saying that if the current number, this one, as a result, the result after having done the replacement, if the length is equals to number's length, which is 10, so we are working with an assumption here that a valid phone number should be 10 digits. So if it's equal to number length, then we are setting that as we are setting the formatted the value or the what's stored in this formatted phone number, which is initially null, to the current phone number. If not, then we are remaining with null, okay? Then we proceed on outside of our constructor. What we do is we work with this getNumber method, and it is returning that phone number. Then after that, we can print. So we are still with inside, in case you missed, you got lost in the flow, we are still inside our local class. After that, what happens is in this print original numbers, we are saying that these are our original numbers. We just want to show 1 and 2, what numbers were passed as arguments in our constructor. And then now we are outside of the local class. Back to the method. So we're inside now the body of the method. And inside the body of the method, we are creating an object out of our phone number class. This is an instantiation and initialization at the same time. This was already covered, so it's an object creation. This is how we do it in Java, in case you missed that session. So phone number, this constructor expects us to pass an argument of type string. So we are passing in phone number 1, and the second object we are passing in phone number 2. So if you'd wish to go and see where they are, as I am tracking it, because if I highlight this, I'll see another highlight on the parameter of the method. If I highlight the second one, I'll see it on the parameter. Okay. So if you get lost, maybe you have a very long lines of code, you don't know where the initialization is, or maybe the declaration is, you can just right click on it, and then you go to declaration and usages, and then it will take you there, to navigate you there. So we are initializing, or rather when we're creating our object, we are passing in the parameters of the method validate phone number. Okay, so there we go. After that, you can take your object and print the original numbers. So whichever object you'll work with, we expect to see the original numbers and the results. Still inside the method, we are working with another if-else statement, or rather different if-else statements. In the first one, we're saying that we should take the object and get the number from it. So the get number is returning formatted phone number. So we are accessing the formatted phone number from that and setting it to null. Checking if it's null. So if it's equal to null, we want to say that it is invalid. Otherwise, we want to print that number. We do the same for the second object that we created here, my number 2, and we either see if it's invalid or if we can see the value. So we've passed in 1, 2, -456 -7890. 456 -7890. What I expect to happen from the code is that the hyphen will be removed and replaced with nothing. Like it's just a string, but it has nothing in it. So let's run this main method and see. And so first off, I can see the original numbers there. Then I see that the first number is this. The second number is invalid because there was also that limit that it should be inside the initialization of our constructor for our local class, that it should be at least 10 digits, or rather equals to 10 digits. So we just, you see here, number length. So in our initialization in the constructor, we say that the number length needs to be 10 digits. There you go. So all the hyphens were removed. If you have any other character that's not a digit between 0 and 9, it will also be removed. We'll learn more about regex much later, but we are going to get there. Please make a point of going through the code once again to understand if you got lost somewhere. I usually start my explanation of what's going on in the code from the main method, unless of course the main method is in a different class. Then you can just look at it to try and walk through the code. So let's now look at the comments, because the comments are where I included some of them are already included in the official documentation, but then I added some others just to set apart what's in the official documentation and what is, because some of the things changed and what is I would like us to cover. So this is a static method. The same rules as a normal static methods applied. For example, it cannot access instance members or instance variables without going through their objects. Okay, so this is why, for example, inside the method here, we had to create an object to access members of the class, the local class, print original numbers, for example. So same rules still apply. Now, next, make sure you go through this, the changes. So I am working with JDK 22. Depending on what JDK you're working with, the rules could be different. So JDK 7 and below, this was a fact. The fact that local class can only access final variables. So JDK 7 and below, this was an actual fact. But later, you were allowed to work with this. So I'm on JDK 22. So I can just comment that out and remain with this. This can still work. This can work from JDK 8 and above. So take note of that. These changes are there. So if you're working with the original documentation, just note that it is working with JDK 8. So sometimes you find that there are differences there. Going on to the next comment now. So as of JDK 8 and later, they are either final or effectively final. Effectively final means it is not declared as final explicitly, but it is final because it has not been reassigned. So if to test that out, if I try to reassign this, I'll see a compile time error, because if it's a local class, the variable that it is accessing needs to be effectively final. So this is no longer effectively final. So it's even letting me know I need to make it final right there. So I'll just comment that back out again and proceed. Okay, the next comment is this one. Anytime local class is accessing a variable or a parameter of the enclosing block, it is referred to as a captured variable. So for example, in this case, because we are accessing number length, which is a variable inside validate phone numbers, the enclosing block, the method whose enclosing block the class is in, we refer to it as captured variable. So that is just the lingo, nothing much there. Another thing, as of JDK 8 and later, if you declare the local class in a method, it can access the parameters, and we have been able to use those parameters inside the class. So take note of that. this is another capture because it is capturing the parameters. So these are captured parameters inside the class. Another thing is this is possible in JDK 8 and later, where you can work with your object to access the members of your class, your local class within the enclosing block. And that is that. So take time, go through it. Sometimes you might have to go through it more than once if you're just meeting all these many rules at once. But most of the concepts here, that's why I didn't go on a deep dive on the concepts, were already covered in a previous session, apart from rejects, which we will talk about in an upcoming session. And while you're going through the official documentation, please be keen on that. Some of the rules have been updated. Maybe after JDK 8, some of them after JDK 16. So yeah, see you on the next one with anonymous classes.